Good morning, another day on the job, and I'm suffering with man flu today, so my voice sounds a little bit husky. So an exciting day today, lots of things happening all at once, a bit more progress in the walling. I'd like to try and get this section built up to what will become the footings and the foundation for the feature blade wall. So yesterday, Dan had started digging out a slightly wider area here which we can pour as a concrete slab for a foundation. Obviously this walling is going to be considerably higher than the surround of the pond, allowing for that blade to pour into the pond and create a nice height and a bit of splash for a nice feature. And having that weight of rock right on the edge of the pond pouring into the depths, we can't just put stonework of that height directly onto sort of bare earth or bare soil without a proper foundation. So we've dug a trench that's considerably wider than the wall. It's gone down a good depth, and this is going to be filled with concrete. We've encountered the other end of that old 4-inch waste pipe, if you remember, that we had discovered at that side of the pond. That's going to come out at some stage. And to do this, we have dug out a trench and left just a little retainer here so that we can make sure that we're not having to have any issues with draining down the pond just yet. We'll get this bit poured first. Once that's gone off, this bit can be dug out, and then we can set a sort of a wall in front with some concrete just to create one solid piece. This is where the 4-inch outlets from the filtration system are going to go run into the pond liner. So the 2 filtration systems are going to be concealed behind me over here, and that 4-inch outlet from the filter is going to be concealed underground and will enter into the pond below water level, keeping everything very discreet. So through the pond liner over at this section here, there's going to be 2 4-inch through liner connectors, and they will be sort of central to the wall underneath the blade here. So that pipe work has to be put into position before we can start to pour the concrete slab. So today, a combination of walling, a combination of digging, thinking about levels and depths for the trench for the pipe work to go back to the filtration system. A lot to think about. So the last couple of days wall building has stopped, although it's not been completed, so that we can start to get in some of the fixtures and pipework and fittings and lay a foundation, which is going to be the footing for the raised feature wall in this area. And in order to get that foundation in, the 2 discharges for the filtration system had to be laid first. So they've gone through the pond line, and we've got 2 4-inch outlets here and here with an appropriate 4-inch liner connector. They're all solvent weld fitted, and then for belt and braces covered in wet water sticky stuff as well. Both pipes trenched beneath ground, so the pipe here is going to be obviously below water level with a 90-degree, these are the Evolution Aqua rubber connectors, nice easy joints, very easy to fit, non-permanent so they can be moved around. And into those 90-degree connectors, that's where the outlet for the filtration system will get plumbed in. Here, where it's going to be underneath all of the concrete and within that foundation, I wanted to make sure that that was permanent, so that's been done with the solvent weld. Decided to leave this old soil pipe in place. It's not in use, and actually that's going to help to act as a bit of a ground anchor as it's disappearing off into the ground behind the pond. So we're just going to pour over the top of that. So the base of this hole for the foundation has been lined with some old pond liner, just to make sure that the poured concrete doesn't dry out too quickly. The moisture will soak away into the ground, and if it dries out too rapidly, that's going to really compromise the integrity of the strength of the foundation. So it wants to be drying as slowly as possible. Now this is a really good size foundation for a relatively small wall, but obviously it's right on the edge of the pond here. So again, we need to make sure that there's a proper firm footing that we can build up all of this stonework on. Of course, with typical bad luck, right in the way was that bloody great tree stump growing out of the ground here. So yesterday, a couple of hours were spent getting that dug out, but we were successful in removing that. Dan's just making sure that before we fill the pond up to give it a wet test, that all of the pipe is properly stabilised, that there's soil beneath this supporting it, because obviously when this fills up with water, there's going to be a certain amount of weight here which is then going to impact the joints over this end. And before we can start to pour the foundation, I want to give all of this a good wet test to make sure that there are no leaks from any of the solvent well joints where the 4-inch pipe meets the pond liner. So we're going to end up refilling the pond with all of the reclaimed pond water temporarily, just to get it filled up so that these are submersed. And as long as I'm happy that there's no leaks, then we can continue to start to pour the concrete. And this is going to be a big job in itself. We've got the cement mixer brought over here. I've got a ton of ballast in the back of the van currently, and we're going to have to start shipping the aggregates over here so that we can mix in the machine and pour it directly into the hole, and then start shoveling the concrete around and get it into position. So I think the rest of the day is going to be spent mixing and pouring. But it's Friday. Happy days. Friday, that means it's non-alcoholic prony day, doesn't it? I think so.
I thought Friday was alcoholic prony.
Alcoholic, even better. Pond's filled up. I'm just giving a very good visual inspection to all of the joints and anywhere with potential leak spots before we then get this concrete pad filled. And thankfully everything is looking absolutely fine. Fantastic. Right. Well, the next job is an awful lot of mixing. Feeling fit?
Very fit.
Good. Always fit. Glad I'm wearing waders. This is quite a foundation to pour and mix by hand. Now we've got some reinforcement metalwork that's going in here as well. We'll get a certain amount of concrete poured, and then we'll start knocking into place a few grids just for some extra reinforcement. Well, that was quite a big pour. That's almost 2 tons of ballast have gone into this. All hand mixed. Filled up nicely. We've got plenty of rebar in there, reinforcements. The pipes are nicely covered. I'm just going to go over it and give it a final sort of tamp and a slight smooth over. And then we can cover it. It can go off over the weekend. And on Monday, we'll be able to do a merry little dance on it. And what's amazing when you're doing jobs like this, when you know, ponds, any sort of building work, is just how much goes into the initial groundwork and prep. All of the unseen stuff, you know, there's a lot of cost, a lot of time and a lot of effort in this prep work, in all this groundwork. And it's not even seen when the job's finished. But it's essential stuff. Now, I don't have to be particularly fussy about this. As long as it's as kind of even and level as the surrounding shelf, because obviously this blends in and flows in with the surrounding shelf of the pond work, and the stonework from the edges will then blend in and become the feature wall before then blending back in the other side. So this needs to be kind of uniform to that level. And that is going to do. Shall I stick my initials in here? Of course, typically it's raining now, and one time I don't want it to rain. Now when this has gone off, the final remaining bit of earth bank here is going to have to be dug out, and then we'll reinforce this with a bit of rapid cement to make sure we've formed a nice sort of neat edge to the pond liner, and to make sure that the walling is still being built up on a proper foundation and not on just a bit of earth around the edge. Right, let's get that covered over. That was a job well done. Daniel's a pretty good labourer, I have to say.
Exceptional, I would say.
Exceptional. What's great is I've never had a labourer buy me a fillet steak before, so thank you very much, Daniel.
You're welcome.
Has it arrived yet?
Yes, it has.
Ooh. Fillet steak's on the menu this evening. Although I've always been a fan of ribeye, not that I'm going to grumble.
fairness, you said no one's ever bought you fillet steak before, but I have.
Well, yeah, that's true. Daniel was very generous on one of my birthdays and ended up buying me a whole fillet. Is that right? A fillet of fillet?
Yeah. You have a fillet of fish and a piece of fillet.
At some stage, when we've neared completion, I'm going to bring along my little charcoal barbecue and we're going to knock up some nice steaks. And I'll do my little Jamie Oliver thing on camera.
And what was that little barbecue in aid of, mate?
That's in aid of Daniel's birthday, which has gone past but not unnoticed fairly recently.
2 months is recent.
Was it 2 months ago? No, it wasn't. Right. That's it. That is level enough. So obviously all the pipe work, the returns from the filtration have been sort of set within this foundation. So that's not going anywhere now. Happy with that?
Delighted.
Good, okay. Let's get all this crap cleaned up. So the foundations had the weekend to go off. It's nice and solid, ready to build on. We've got a little bit of work to do in the front section here. There's just a small strip of earth that needs to be dug out and then replaced with a little bit of cement, just to round off and sort of smooth off this edge. Other than that, I can continue with constructing the pond, and just as well really, because autumn is really setting in fast. This sycamore is dropping its leaves rapidly and making a mess. And I really want to crack on and get this done by the end of this month. So a lot of work to do. Well, it's a manky start to the day today. Rain forecast for the next couple of days, which is not conducive to pond building, but there's plenty of other jobs and chores that we can get on with whilst it is wet. There's been a few more days of progress of rock building since I last got the camera out. Almost a complete link of rock all the way around the pond, and have started the foundations and the base layer of the feature wall, which is quite exciting. It's really nice to see stonework now around the majority of the pond. And you can see over here, this is the first sort of foundation layer of what will be the raised feature wall, which is going to hold the integrated water blade. A little bit more walling over here to complete. I've got an overflow section that's going to be going through the pond liner over here, disappearing off to a handy nearby drain, so that's got to go in. But I think today we'll make use of the bad weather and spend much of it just going through that rock pile, which is spread across the garden, and get cutting. You've got some stuff on your face. Oh, lovely, lovely, but you have been given a nice gift. Here you are.
Thank you, mate.
Thank you. Cheers. Hot dog?
Try your mouth.
Manky, isn't it? So when it's like this, there's not an awful lot of wall building I can do. Not great for mixing up slop, and you can't really lay the stone when it's wet either. But an awful lot of stone for us to chop and prepare, which means that we can have a good day when the weather clears up. But not the most interesting job, is it?
No.
Still, I like being under here. It's like camping. And you all know I'm a big fan of camping. Another day, another morning on a wet site. We've had some terrible weather recently, and this weekend it was biblical, lots of thunderstorms. Quite surprised to find this morning that my gazebo is still standing, but the pond itself was filled up massively, right up to the point of the marginal zone here, so it's far too deep for me to be working on. So the first thing I'm doing this morning is getting the pond drained down a few inches so I can start to lay rock. There's a lot to do. We've started to build up on the feature wall here. Friday was really wet, so much of the day was spent just cutting rocks, and we've got ready materials to use this week. But I did manage to get a few bits and pieces down here for the back of the wall. Now obviously you're seeing the inside face, which is the messy bit. I'm looking at the much nicer, sort of cleaner bit at the back here, but of course this isn't really going to be visible. I could build this out of block work and then just face it with natural stone at the front. But we're not quite sure what's going to go on the back here, and it will be much nicer to have natural stone all the way around. So I'm praying that the weather gods are kind to me this week. Really got to pull my finger out and crack on and get the bulk of this done. There's a lot of work in getting this wall finished off, integrating just the sort of outside edges of the pond into this wall, still have an overflow to put in through the pond liner, various pipe work and fittings for the blade. I've got the blade here. This is a lovely, great big 90 centimetre Oase extended blade, extended lip water blade. But there's going to be challenges in getting this straight cascade into a curved wall. And obviously the longer the blade in relation to the curve of the wall, the harder that is to be able to integrate this without bits of it overhanging or not overhanging enough. So it's going to be interesting to see how I get on with building this, and I may well have to incorporate some sort of recessed, flatter section of wall within the curve to make sure that this fits in nicely. But it's a lovely big blade. It's only got a single entrance, bottom or rear entrance, and that's going to create a lovely, lovely curtain of water pouring into the pond. We've also included that, I think, all essential integrated LED strip light that's going to fit inside this blade, so that's going to look awesome at night time lit up. Right, we've got to get the fish holding tank drained down as well, because that's really, really full and the fish are right up at the edges of the holding tank and in danger of jumping out, so I've got to get that drained down a few inches. I'm flying solo for the next couple of days. Dan's away, so a bit of peace and quiet. So another big challenge of doing this feature wall is having it right on the edge, overhanging the deep section of the pond. The pond is too deep and the sides too angled for me to work standing in the pond and build the wall anywhere beyond, you know, a sort of a foot or so in height. I'm going to be working quite high, and I'm just not going to be able to stand down there and do that. So I'm bridging the gap here with a couple of bits of slightly dodgy old planks of wood, hoping that they're going to support my weight sufficiently to be able to build this wall. See what happens. So I've just been doing some of the finishing touches to an overflow system here. I think it's very important in a pond that you can regulate and control exactly the depth of the pond. A pond of this sort of size with such a large surface area during heavy rain, there's going to be an awful lot of catchment going into this, so we need somewhere for this to run off. And my preferred choice, rather than just having a pipe sort of sitting on top of the pond liner, is to have actually a proper dedicated through liner connector onto which I can put some fittings, extend it, drop it down, articulate it, which is going to help to govern and regulate the depth. So this is heading off to a handy culvert at the end of the garden, and this area now can be built up. Just going to make sure that I keep this covered so we don't fill it with any muck or debris which might cause some blockages. The last couple of days have been spent building up some of this wall, so nearing completion. We've still got to come up a good 18 inches, perhaps 2 foot in height to reach the full elevation. But it's starting to take shape now. So I've got some more material to start building up this corner. Dan's been very busy filling up the void at the back here with soil, and just little touches like that make a massive difference to the overall appearance and really make it feel like it's starting to come together now. We even yesterday had a little dummy run with the water blade just to see what it would look like from a height. It's quite impressive. It's a very large blade, so I'm itching to get that into place and then start getting the lighting rigged up. Weather's not been that kind to us. It seems to be raining almost on a daily basis in the mornings and then sort of clears up in the afternoon, so we're just making as much progress as we can. Better crack on. I hope you can hear me all the way over there. I'm not used to having the camera rigged up so far away from me, but this pond is so flipping big. It's miles away when it's the other side of the pond. So as you can see, a few more days of progress on the wall, the bulk of this is built, and we're now at the level where we can think about offering up the stainless steel water blade. We gave that a quick test run last week just to see how it looked. It looks fantastic. It's much larger than the typical kind of blade I would fit for some, most traditional small domestic ponds. It's very in keeping with a pond of this scale and size, and it creates quite an impact. So I'm very excited to get this properly up and running. Now the first thing we'll do is we'll just offer up the water blade and get it central to this wall, make sure the angle's right, the overhang is correct. As I say, that in itself is a little bit tricky, having this straight blade incorporated within this curved wall. But we'll get this central. We've got all the pipework and bits and pieces fed through the wall here, ready to plumb straight into the back of the water blade. I should be using a rear entry instead of a bottom entry. The wall is wide enough that we've got a lot of movement here with the pipe as well, which makes it nice and easy for fitting. I've got a separate pipe here, which is a conduit for the electrical cables for the lights that run inside that water blade. But we'll get it offered up first of all, pack up around it so it stays nice and stable, and then we can build up around that once it's set tomorrow. And then, really, by the end of tomorrow, this wall needs to have been built, and we can move on to the next stage of the pond. That is pretty central. I reckon there is good.
It's not my first rodeo.
Honestly, straight down, that was, I think, perfect positioning. It's a good angle as well, that one. Okay, leave it there. I'll have a measure up either side and make sure that that is dead central. And then we'll start building some rock around it. Very nice. Did I bring the tape measure over?
You did not.
Oh, what a tit. This pond's too big, there's too much walking involved. 88, 89. I think it might be too much move that way. Oh, okay, 88. Okay, leave it there. Let's go and have a look. Front of the water blade wall, very exciting. This piece of timber here has been very useful for the bulk of this building. This is something that we dug up, was actually used originally as part of the shoring up of the old bank of the pond. Any old rubbish had been sort of put in there to hold the bank up. This piece of timber was taken out, we didn't throw it away, and it's been very useful. I'm glad we hung on to it. So, water blade just offered up, central to the wall, happy with the position and the angle of it. We've taken a few looks from far away just to make sure we're happy with that position. And now it's a case of setting this into the pond. And what I've done is I've cut some small, thin strips of stone of various gauges, which are going to be able to go in front of this. Obviously there needs to be a slight overhang protruding into the pond of this lip. And this box section here needs to be concealed. I see a lot of water blades built with all of this fully visible on show, and that's not how they should be built. They should be integrated within a wall and concealed, and just have that spout, just have that tip of the blade sticking out, allowing you to get that fall of water. So these small bits of stone are going to get mortared into place in front of the blade like so. So that's completely concealed. We'll put a few stones around the back just to hold it into place, and we'll sit this on a bed of mortar as well, and then we're going to leave it. I don't want to, once this is set and levelled, I don't want to do anything which is potentially going to move that. We can obviously build around it and we can build behind it, and then tomorrow, once this has had a chance to go off, I can then put the little steel lintel that I've got across this, so we can just build up a couple of courses of stone above it as well. Before I do that, I've then got to install the LED strip light, which is going to fit into here. We've got the conduit at the back here, which that strip light cable is going to feed down through and then channel off to the electrics in the corner. But for the time being, we'll build this section up. So the water blade has had all night for the mortar around it to go off. This is now nice and fixed, so we can go about getting this plumbed in. Now you can see here when I was constructing the wall, I deliberately left an open section here so that we had a lot of flexibility and movement in the pipes. Previously, when I've built a lot of water blades, especially smaller ones, I've always opted for the bottom entry rather than the rear entry. I can never say that without smiling, and Daniel's not making it any easier for me. Very childish of me. Having it as a bottom entry means that the pipe generally is fixed. I've tried messing around with a larger bore hose so that I can then feed a pipe through it, and that works if you're using small bore, smaller blades like I've got on my own pond at home where I'm using just a 25mm 1-inch pipe. But when you start using 32 and 40mm hoses, you have to have a really, really large conduit through the wall to be able to allow movement within that pipe, to give you flexibility then to move that blade where you want it and to position it where you want it. And unless you've got a very, very wide wall like this, it's just not practical to have such a large conduit through that wall. So previously I've had pipes fixed in place a little bit longer than I need, and when I get to a certain height I'll cut it off, and that's the height it's going to be and it can't be anything else. So having the flexibility here of having a rear entry and having the nice wide wall and having this open section here just meant I could move the pipe around a bit, which gave an awful lot of freedom of movement for that blade so we could get it positioned. So we were happy with its final position. We can now plumb it in and we can just fill this void in now. We've got a few cobbles and stones and bits and pieces that we'll just pour in, and then we can start to continue building the wall over the top of this. The second pipe here is the conduit for the cable with the LED strip light that's going to fit inside here. That's pretty much the right length there, so I'll leave that in position, and the cable will just nick out of one corner of the blade, feed down there and disappear off to the power supply. All of the fittings screwed directly into the back of the water blade. There's a bung that screws in at the bottom of this to block off that entry underneath. We've glued that one as well, just again as belt and braces, and this one just threads in. It already comes supplied with a rubber O-ring, and again, once it's tightened up, just a little bit of wet water sticky stuff around that, just again as a final bit of security. As always, the multi-stage hose tail, cut off the smaller increments that you don't need to make sure that you're not restricting the flow at all. In this example, we're using the 32mm, the 1.25 inch, which is the second largest aperture on that hose tail. So I'm going to give this a clean off, wrap around a little bit of PTFE tape, secure the hose, clamp it down with a hose clip, and we're good to go. We'll give it a quick wet run and see what it looks like, and then we'll continue to fill and build the final section of the wall. The weather today has been horrendous, and in fact the forecast for this week is really not looking good. Not what we need really on the last week of a job like this. It's going to slow down the rate of progress, particularly on the construction side of things, but it's out of our hands. We can only do what we can do, so I can't let it get me down too much. And here it comes again. But not all is lost. We've got other jobs that we can be doing in the rain, one of which is constructing some shuttering, a little timber frame, so that we can shutter off and pour a little concrete pad so we can start to get the filtration systems positioned. These two 4-inch pipes that are protruding from the ground are connected up to the main outlets of the filtration system. So we've got to position the two filters. This lid of one of the filters is the footprint of what will be one position of the filter, and we're just lining up where the outlet from the filter will be and making sure that we'll be able to connect it up to each outlet. So in the rain, at least we can create that frame, shutter off, and even pour if we have to. Well, the rain's not stopping, so I'm having a little shelter under my gazebo and having a look at the waterfall illumination for the stainless steel blade. This is the waterfall illumination 90 from Oase, and this fits perfectly with the 90cm extended lip stainless steel blade that I've also picked up from Oase, which actually is currently running. You can't see it, but I can see it and hear it, and it's looking very nice. Now this is the LED strip light that fits inside it. It's a nice little discreet illumination bar, and you've got a couple of little plastic feet conveniently embossed with left and right so you can't get it mixed up, which will fit either side of the bar like so, and then this will clip into a little recess within the stainless steel water blade, and you've got these tiny little sort of hooks here that will then hook onto the back of the steel, just hold it in place. It's fixed, but in the future, if ever you have to remove it for any reason, you can prise it out. And again, the importance of me having that conduit so I can feed this cable through it means that if ever we have to replace that light in the future, we can do so without too much fuss. Now, the importance of having a large diameter conduit to feed the cable through is apparent when you see some of the little connections that you get on the end of some of these. I mean, this isn't too big. You could probably get this through a 25mm 1-inch conduit, but if you've got quite a tight curve and that starts to compress and reduce the actual bore of the conduit, even then you're going to struggle to get that through. So I've opted with that 40mm 1.5 conduit deliberately to make it nice and easy for free passage with fittings like this. And this section here will just plug in directly to the female end of the transformer, and then from there you've got a standard mains flex which you can put a plug on, plug it in, or wire it into an outdoor switch box, extend the cable if you need to. But there's plenty of length on here. You get, I think, 10 meters of flex on the LED bar, and then an additional 3 meters or 5 meters on the transformer. So plenty of distance. And here we've got the first glimpse of the blade running. That's a lovely fall. It's splashing a little bit too violently, but obviously the pond is not filled up to its full level yet. So once we get that level up another foot, the impact of that's a little bit softer, projects away from the wall nicely. No issues at all with integrating that straight blade within the curve of the wall. I think that works really nicely. And having that illuminated bar within that is just the icing on the cake. Very nice. Water blade wall, pretty much complete. Do you say complete or completed? Dark and dingy in here, isn't it?
Watch the wire.
Watch the wire. So this is the first slab that have been poured, which has had a couple of days now to go off, so we can now carefully remove that wooden shuttering frame, reuse that to pour the second one. Filtration system can get set up on here today, and then the outlet discharge from the filter get connected to the 4-inch pipe we've got here sticking up above the ground. The second slab is going to be poured about where Dan's standing now, ready to get plumbed into this 4-inch outlet here. So I'm just connecting up one of the filtration pumps. We've got a new Oase Aquamax Eco Premium 20,000, so a 20,000 litre per hour pump. That's the largest in the Aquamax submersible range. They do much larger pumps, obviously. So we're going to have this one and a second pump delivering 17,500 litres per hour. That's one of the Oase Eco Classic pumps that was here running originally before we started work on the pond. So those two pumps combined with the two Screen-O-Matic 140,000 units, both of which are running the Victron Eco 240 watt UV as well. So plenty of kit, and should do a really good job at keeping this pond nice and clear. I know Dan's always been very keen to add additional livestock to the pond. So as always, the belt and braces approach, making sure that the kind of overspec on kit is advisable. Using heavy duty pipe, as I always prefer to use, rather than the cheaper, more flexible but less durable Superflex hose. And at this time of year, all the plastic on the pipework tends to be quite stiff. So it helps if you can just heat it up. A bit of hot water or the use of a heat gun is very useful here, just to make it a little bit softer, so I can push it onto the pump and get a nice connection. Dan's busy doing the electrics the other end, which doesn't bode well. He's had a couple of mishaps wiring up some plugs earlier on this job, so it'll be interesting to see what happens with this one. Doing all right with your plug? Yeah, he's giggling away to himself. 100% fail rate at the moment he's got. water blade running behind me. Doesn't sound very nice actually. The pond at the moment obviously isn't up to its full level, and the blade is pouring a little bit too high. And I think that the water, as it comes out of the blade, it kind of reaches its maximum velocity as it speeds up. And it sounds a little bit too splashy when it's hitting the water, but once the pond is filled up, we've got another foot or so of water to go in. That will just soften the impact of that blade and make it just sound a little bit nicer. Right, this is thick hose. It's taking a little while to heat up. Let's get that on. Jubilee clip as always to make sure that's nice and tight. It might seem like a snug fit to begin with, but over time, as the hose kind of loses some of its elasticity, with the water pressure of 20,000 litres per hour, that's a pretty powerful pump. You may find that that is able to push off that hose with disastrous effects in the future. So it wants to be well clamped down. There we go. That's on to the hose tail nice and snugly, and we'll just clamp it down with the use of a hose clip. Now, little tips of the hose clip: much better to use a little socket set or a ratchet set to torque it down properly, rather than using a screwdriver. Otherwise you're going to have the inevitable slip where you end up stabbing yourself in the hand, and you'll never get it quite as tight as you will do with a socket set. Likewise, don't over tighten it. Once you feel a bit of resistance, snatch it up a little bit further, and that's nice and tight. You done your plug yet? Remember, earth at the top, not live. Pardon? Yeah, all right, I might have made a little mistake. I cut some flex a little bit too short, which I had to rewire. Never mind. We'll reuse it on something else. Right, we are good to switch this on and get one of the filters operational. So we're just at the stage now of fitting a light, one of the main feature lights, to the wall beneath the water blade. Great little modification that you can do are the ground stakes that come supplied with the lights. You can cut off with a little hacksaw the end of the ground stake, which secures the light bracket, and with that you can then secure that anywhere and hang the light on it. So that is going to be secured to the stone, submersed underwater, and the light bracket is going to hook onto that, acting as an uplighter and illuminating that wall very nicely. So that's the light attached to the bracket, fitted nicely to the centre of the blade, and that's going to act as a fantastic submersed uplighter, illuminating part of this feature wall and sort of the curtain of water as it pours over. So if my assistant would like to switch the light on, ta-da! You don't get an awful lot of the benefit during the daytime, but this at night time is going to look stunning. So I shall look forward to getting the camera out and recording a bit of this later on this evening.
You don't often stay that late, eh?
Oh, I'm doing a bit of a late shift this afternoon. That's the problem with working at this time of year. It gets dark far too quickly. Dan's had to go back and do something. I've just worked on a little bit later so I can wire up the last set of lights. And I have to say, I'm very impressed. I'll just leave you with this last view before I go home. Looks very pretty, doesn't it? Now we've still got more lights to go in here, and obviously the pond itself is very murky. You're not going to get any benefit of submerged lighting until the pond clears. But that water blade looks absolutely stunning with the integrated LED and that wall uplighter. Well, I'm going to get home. A well-earned hot bath, I think, today. I'm getting fed up with this manky, wet, miserable weather and all the mud and the slop that we're having to work in. Are we on this normal video? Yes, we are. 1080/60.
I normally look better in 4K.
Yeah. You all right down there?
Very good.
Cut that off. Little pilot hole through. That can get drilled to whatever it is. That looks awful. Gonna start that again. Right. Okay. You're keeping this very professional. No, don't do that.